Good morning, students. Students, today we are going to do this story, The Chinese Statue by Jeffrey Archer. Before we start with the story, let's talk about the theme of the story. The major theme of the story is appearance versus reality. Means whatever appears to be true, that may not be true, right? So anything which is visible in a particular manner to your eye, that may not be the truth. The truth might be something which is very different, or rather completely different from what it seems to be. So that is the major theme. In the end, this theme will be highlighted, and we'll come to know more about this theme once we start with the story. It has been mentioned in the introduction of the author that his stories, they have surprise endings, right? It has been mentioned. So this story also has a surprise ending, right? Which surprise ending means the ending which is very difficult for very different from what the reader can judge, right? So normally in a normal story, what happens? You read a story and then you can predict the ending. But the stories of Archer, they are different, right? They have surprise endings or like strange endings, which the reader cannot detect when he is in the middle of the story. So they surprise the readers. So let's start with the story, The Chinese Statue. The little Chinese statue was the next item to come under the auctioneer's hammer. Who is an auctioneer? Auctioneer is the person who conducts the auction, right? Conducts the auction by, he has several things which are to be auctioned, and he conducts the auction by accepting bids from the people, the bids from the people who are interested in buying a particular thing or article or whatever. So that is an auctioneer. The little Chinese statue was the next item to come under the auctioneer's hammer. So the next item in the line of the things to be auctioned was a little Chinese statue, lot 103. So lot 103 was the number allotted to that Chinese statue, right? So lot 103 was those quiet murmurings that always precede the sale of a masterpiece. So the moment this item, that is the Chinese statue, came on the auctioneer's table, right? You must have seen the auctioneer, no? Who's with the hammer and then he bangs the hammer 3 times, right? After people quote different prices which they are willing to pay for a particular commodity. So this item, the Chinese statue, was the next item to come on the auctioneer's table, and the moment it landed itself on the auctioneer's table, the number allotted to this was lot 103, and the moment it was there on the table, quiet murmuring means the people who were there in that hall, they started whispering and murmuring to each other. And this is something which is very common whenever a masterpiece is put on sale, right? Whenever there is a very wonderful, great and magnificent item, right? So whenever such an item comes on the auctioneer's table, these types of murmurings and whisperings, they start in the hall, right? The people who are in the hall, the bidders who are there in the hall, they start murmuring and whispering amongst themselves. The auctioneer's assistant held up the delicate piece of ivory. So the Chinese statue was made of ivory. So the assistant who was there along with the auctioneer, what did he do? He held up the delicate piece of ivory for the packed audience. Packed audience means the hall was crowded, the place was crowded, and there were many people in the hall. So what did the assistant do? He lifted up that Chinese statue and held it up so that the people can have a nice view of that Chinese statue, right? Packed audience to admire, while the auctioneer glanced around the room to be sure he knew where the serious bidders were seated, right? So while the assistant lifted up the statue so that the people in the hall, they can have a good view of it, right? They can have a nice view of it. In the meantime, what was this auctioneer doing? He was trying to figure out where the serious buyers were sitting, right? Because everyone who was there was not there to buy. So he tried to figure out where these people who will be interested in buying this statue, where they are sitting. I studied my catalog. So then the author was also there, and he studied his catalog and read the detailed description of the piece and what was known of its history. See, the bidders, whenever there is an auction, the bidders, they are given catalogs, which contains the items which are to be put on sale, and the details of that item, those items, they are mentioned in that catalog. So a catalog was there in front of the writer also, and the writer picked up that catalog and tried to read about this Chinese statue, which was the next item to be put on sale, and what was known of its history, and what was the history of this Chinese statue. He tried to find out in that catalog. The statue had, this is what he comes to know. The statue had been purchased in Hali Chuan in 1871 and was referred to as what the Sotheby's quaintly described as the property of the gentleman. So the place of origin of this statue was a place known as Hali Chuan in 1871. This place is in China, right? So the statue was purchased in this place in 1871 and was referred to as what the Sotheby's quaintly. Quaintly means in a very unusual manner, something which is not common, described as the property of the gentleman. So the statue was described as the property of the gentleman. It means that the owner of that statue, the owner of that particular piece of Chinese statue didn't want to reveal his identity to everyone. Usually meaning that some member of the aristocracy did not wish to admit that he was having to sell off one of his family heirlooms, right? So just to hide the name of the owner, just to keep the name of the owner as anonymous, this statue was mentioned to be the property of a gentleman, right? That it was the auctioneer just mentioned that this statue belongs to a gentleman. This is the property of the gentleman, a nobleman, and didn't reveal the name of the owner of that statue. So when was this done? When was the name of the owner not revealed? Whenever the owner wanted to hide his identity and he didn't want to reveal that he's in dire need to sell one of his family heirloom. Family, what do you mean by heirloom? Heirlooms are normally some valuable object which is owned by a particular family, right? And then they are transferred from one generation to other. You must have seen in movies, right? This I am giving you. This is the piece of jewelry, right? Ancestral piece of jewelry, and I am giving you, and this has been handed over from one generation to another. So that is the family heirloom. Right, so it's normally a valuable object which is owned by the family, and it is not sold. It is an honor. It's like a family honor and family prestige is associated with that particular article. So having to sell off one of his family heirlooms, and because these heirlooms, they are the pride of the family or the prestige and the honor of the family is associated with these objects. So maybe that gentleman, he didn't want to reveal it in front of the public that he had to sell off his family heirloom. I wondered if that was the case on this occasion and decided to do some research to discover I wondered if that was the case on this occasion, and decided to do some research to discover what had caused the little statue to find its way into the auction rooms on that Thursday morning over 100 years later, right? So this was mentioned in the catalog that the statue was purchased in 1871. So this made the writer curious. The narrator of the story, he was curious to know that what happened, right? As it is, the name of the owner of the statue was not revealed. The only thing which was mentioned in the catalog was that it is the property of a gentleman, right? So the writer became curious. I wondered if that was the case on this occasion. So he thought that maybe this would have been the case, that to protect the family honor and the prestige, the name has not been revealed. And then he decided that he will do some research at his own level to find out that what all happened which made this little small Chinese statue to come into the auction room on this particular Thursday morning, 100 years later, right? Was bought in 1871. So approximately after 100 years, what went wrong that this Chinese statue found its way or came to this auction room on a Thursday morning. Lot number 103 declared the auction. What am I bid for this magnificent example of? So he held the auction. The auctioneer started speaking that what price are you going to offer for this magnificent example of? And then from this point, the story goes into the flashback, right? The writer starts writing about the research which he did about the Chinese statue. So from this particular point, see, the story opens in an auction room, right? People are making bids. Then a Chinese statue, the number is lot number 103, is presented in front of the people, right, to make the bid. And then this makes the writer curious, and then he starts writing about the Chinese statue, right? So the story goes into the flashback from this point. Sir Alexander Heathcote, as well as being a gentleman, was an exact man. So this person, Sir Alexander Heathcote, he was the person who actually brought that statue from China to this place, right? So Sir Alexander Heathcote was, as well as being a gentleman. So this person, Sir Alexander Heathcote, he was a gentleman, and he was, along with being a gentleman, he was also an exact man. Now, what is the meaning of exact man? You will come to know in the following lines. Exact man means a very precise man who did everything very precisely, accurately, at the proper time. And so this was his another characteristic. He was exactly 5'3¼ tall, right? So his height also, he measured his height also in such great precision, right? 6'3¼ tall. Rose at 7 o'clock every morning, joined his wife at breakfast to eat one boiled egg, cooked for precisely 4 minutes. Cooked for precisely 4 minutes means cooked for exactly 4 minutes. His breakfast he got up at 7 in the morning, then he had his breakfast with his wife, and his breakfast was of one boiled egg which was cooked exactly for 4 minutes, along with 2 pieces of toast and 1 spoonful of Cooper's marmalade. Marmalade is a jam, right? So along with Cooper's marmalade. So he ate this particular brand of marmalade, and only 1 spoonful of Cooper's marmalade applied on his toast, and drink 1 cup of China tea. So this was his breakfast. So that is why it has been mentioned that he was an exact man. So every day he used to have this breakfast. Okay. He would then take a hackney carriage from his home in Cadogan Garden at exactly 8:25. So exactly at 8:25, he used to leave his house and took a carriage from his home, which was in Cadogan Garden, and arrived at the Foreign Office at promptly 8:59. And exactly at 8:59, he used to reach the Foreign Office where he was working. What is a hackney carriage? Hackney's carriage is a carriage, was a carriage rather. It was driven by horses and it was normally used as a taxi. Right? So that was a hackney's carriage. And exactly at 8:59, he would reach at the Foreign Office at promptly 8:59, returning home again at the stroke of 6 o'clock. So these are the characteristics which made him an exact man. So that is why he has been referred to as an exact man, because he did everything precisely, accurately, and exactly. Right? So returning home again on the stroke of 6 o'clock, and exactly at 6 o'clock he used to return home. Sir Alexander had been exact from an early age, as became the only son of a general. Because his father was a general, so he was a military man, so obviously he will be very disciplined, right? So Sir Alexander, being the son of a general, he was an exact man from his early days, right? From his childhood. But unlike his father, he chose to serve his queen in diplomatic service, another exacting point. So now see, here the meaning of exacting is something which requires a lot of effort. Right? So he says that he chose to serve his queen in diplomatic service, but unlike his father, though his father joined military, his father was a soldier, but he decided to do something else. He wanted to join the queen in England. You have the queen, so he wanted to join the service of the queen in diplomatic service rather than military service. He didn't join military, and he joined the diplomatic services. Another exacting calling, which was, what is the calling? A very something which comes from inside, and it is like a very strong desire which you have to do a particular thing. So that is your inner calling. So exacting calling means it was something which required a lot of effort. Lot of effort and a lot of detailing was required. So that is exacting calling. He progressed from a shared desk, and then because he was a very hard-working employee, so this person, Mr. Alexander Heathcote, he progressed from a shared desk at the Foreign Office. So he was in the Whitehall to third secretary in Calcutta, to second secretary in Vienna, to first secretary in Rome, to deputy ambassador. So that this is how he was promoted. To second secretary in Vienna, to first secretary in Rome, to deputy ambassador in Washington, and finally to minister in Peking. Right? So he went to Peking. So Peking is in China. This is how he reached China. Right? He started his service with a shared desk, and then he was promoted to the third secretary. As a third secretary, he was sent to Calcutta. As a second secretary, he was sent to Vienna. As a first secretary, he was sent to Rome. And then as the deputy ambassador, he went to Washington. And finally, as a minister, he was sent to Peking. He was delighted when Mr. Gladstone invited him to represent the government in China. Right? So he was very happy when he got this opportunity to go to China. Mr. Gladstone informed him that he was being sent to China as a minister. So he was very happy that he's going to China as a representative of his government, as he had for some considerable time taken more than an amateur interest in the art of the Ming dynasty. Right? Why was he so excited when he heard that he was being sent to China? Because from quite some time he had developed an interest in the Ming dynasty. Right? So more than an amateur interest. What do you mean by amateur interest? Amateur means something which you do just for enjoyment or just for your entertainment, not taking something very seriously, right? So that is amateur. So his interest was more than normal on the this particular subject, that is the Ming Dynasty, the art of the Ming Dynasty. He was very fond of the art of the Ming Dynasty, and so he was very happy when he came to know that he was being sent to China. Right? So this crowning appointment in his distinguished career would afford him what until then he would have considered impossible. Right? So when he got this opportunity to go to China, he was very happy. And this crowning appointment means, right? It was like a very good offer. It was a great offer he got. This made him very happy. And then it was something very of very reputed nature in his distinguished career. Distinguished career means, as it is, he had a wonderful career, right? It has been explained in the above lines, how his career progressed. So he had a distinguished career, right, which would afford him what until then he would have considered impossible. So now, because of his job, he will be sent to China, right? And which till now he considered to be as impossible. Now, because he was being sent by his own country, so he will be able to visit China. He will be able to see, to learn about this Ming Dynasty very closely, right? So this made him very happy because he was going there for work. Till now, he would have thought it to be impossible, right? How will he get a chance to go to China? So the thing which was impossible for him up to now was made possible because he was sent to China for work, an opportunity to observe in their natural habitat. So this appointment to Peking as a minister, right? This gave him an opportunity to observe the Ming art, right? Ming the art culture, the art and culture of the Ming Dynasty in the natural habitat. In their natural habitat means the place where they actually belong, right? Ming Dynasty was in China. So the art, culture and all these things of the Ming Dynasty, it belonged to China. So he got an opportunity to see them, to see those statues, those pieces of art in their natural habitat, in their original place. Some of the great statues, paintings and drawings which he had previously been able to admire only in books. Being in England, he would have been able to admire these things in books only. He must have only read about it. But now, because he was going to China, he was going to Peking, so he will get an opportunity to see these things very closely in their natural habitat, in their original place, the place to which they actually belong. So this thought made him very happy. Any problem, Talia?